Consider that the most terrifying prison you've ever inhabited is the one you've built out of the word I, a linguistic and psychological fortress that's designed to protect that experience of a fatherless boy from this crushing weight of the protection gap, but which has now actually become this suffocating vacuum where the only voice you hear is the echo of your own self-sufficiency. So you've lived your life as this sovereign of one, convinced that your ability to say, I've got this, is the ultimate mark of your masculine maturity. When in reality, it's the most, the most honest confession of your fear of being let down just once again. So you carry the I like a heavy, jagged stone in your pocket, believing that if you ever set that stone down, if you ever move from I to we, you would be dissolving your identity into this sea of dependency that your father's absence taught you was a death sentence. So you're this character again in your story who's successfully reached the summit of his own mountain, only to realize that the air is too thin to breathe alone, and the view is meaningless without a witness there. And so you've mistaken isolation for independence and loneliness for strength, not realizing that this lone wolf role is not the leader of the pack, but the one who has been exiled from the very community that makes that wolf whole. And so you're haunted by the suspicion that if you finally allow the I to end, you'll in essence lose the map. Not again realizing that the only way to truly see the territory is to stop being the only one standing in it, right? This surrender of the isolated ego is the final necessary death that must occur for you to fully transition into becoming a Binteger. And to be a Binteger, again, is to be a whole individual who's intentionally moving towards wholeness by aligning their internal values with their external actions. And so we aren't really talking here about becoming like this whole number, some sterile singular digit in this vacuum that remains unchanged by the numbers around it. We're talking more about the integrity of an integral element. The word integrity itself, it shares the root word from the Latin called integre, which means to bring together parts into a whole. And for the Unmapped Map-Maker, your integrity has been fractured because you've been trying to be a whole while remaining disconnected. You've tried to have this internal world of values that never has to really interact with the external world of people's needs and perspectives. So becoming a Binteger means having the integrity to be an individual whose wholeness is found in their connection with others. And it's a realization that a man is not really a standalone unit, but more a node of integrity in this larger system. So integrity is the quality of being so secure in your own internal alignment that you no longer really need to be the center of the universe to feel your validity. So this integration is the oxygen, if you will, that makes intimacy or intimacy possible. And when you're trapped in the I, intimacy is really a threat because it implies that someone else might have a vote in your reality. And so you view intimacy as a surveillance mission rather than this shared exploration. But when you find the relief of ending the isolated I, it's here that you realize that intimacy is the only thing that can really validate the map that you've been drawing. And so without a we, your I is just really a hypothesis. It's only in the mirror of another's soul that your integrity now becomes a fact. So a Binteger knows that wholeness is not really a solo sport. Integrity is the bridge, if you will, that allows you to be an individual who's strong enough to be interdependent. And you aren't losing yourself when you join the we. You are finally finding the purpose of the I that you've been working so hard to build. So the reason that you're probably clinging to the I with such white-knuckled intensity is most likely this direct result of the protection gap that was created by the man who wasn't there to hold you once upon a time. Because ideally in a child's mapped season, a father is one who demonstrates membership. He shows that you are part of a lineage, a family, a community. And he teaches you ideally that the I is a tool for serving the we. And so you learn here that strength is the most potent when it's integrated with the strengths of others. But without that influence in your life, you learn that membership was like a trap. And you learn that if you belonged to someone, they could leave. And then you'd be left with nothing. So you decided that the only safe place to belong was to yourself. So it's here that you made the I your only home. And now as an adult, the thought of ending the I feels like becoming homeless all over again. So you're now this unmapped map maker who is terrified that connection is just another word for vulnerability. Integrity is the process here of realizing that I was really a lifeboat that you needed for the storm once upon a time, but maybe now has become more of an anchor that is keeping you from ever getting to the shore. So look at maybe the relational fatigue in your life currently. Likely you're the one who is the main character of every drama, right? Even when you're trying to be supportive, you think that you're being strong by handling everything alone. Whereas in actuality, you're just excluding the people who want to love and care for you. And so you treat your partner's help like criticisms, especially critiquing your competence. And this is really a failure of integrity here because you're allowing your defense of the I to destroy the wholeness of what the we could be. So you are this Binteger that is so afraid of being added to by a group that you, it reminds you that you're just a remainder, right? Integrity demands that you stop that solitary performance. It demands that you align your life with the reality that a whole individual is one who knows how to be a part of something. So you're not really diminishing your masculinity by actually needing people around you. You're contextualizing that. And so the Binteger is the individual who's whole enough to be small sometimes. Now, the psychological weight, if you will, of this lone ranger is the burden of this infinite responsibility, right? When you're the only I on your map, you have to be right about everything all the time. And if you make a mistake, the whole world basically collapses because there is no we to catch your fall. And this is like an impossible way to live. The Binteger here knows that the relief of ending the I is distributing the load. It requires integrity to be an individual who realizes that they can't carry the whole world realistically. And when you end your isolated I, you aren't falling. You're succeeding at being a human. You are moving from a state of brittle omnipotence, if you will, to a state of resilient participation. And you're finally allowing your internal values to be tested and strengthened by the external reality of other people's wisdom around you, that they're contributing, right? Now, maybe you're the guy who says, but if I stop being the I, then I'll become one of those nice guys who has basically no backbone. I've seen what happens to men who integrate and they basically lose their drive, like they lose their edge, they become a doormat. So my I is really what keeps me sharp, and I'd rather be the lonely king than a happy peasant. This is that ultimate fatherless fallacy, I would say. You are now confusing submission with connection. A Binteger is the one who has the most backbone in the room because his backbone is really supported by the integrity of the collective. And when you end the I, you're not losing your edge. You're gaining a lever. You aren't giving up your kingship. You are exploring your kingdom to include allies who are coming alongside. So integrity is a state of being an undivided individual, and it's the only thing that keeps integration from becoming enmeshment. Because you don't just vanish into the we, you're actually vouching for the we. You are this Binteger that is essential to the equation here, not a slave to it, right? Another thought that might be holding you back is when you say, I don't know how to exist without the struggle. My entire identity is built on being that guy who does it all alone. And if I'm not the lone survivor, then who the hell am I? Like, the silence of not having to fight for my I every day is terrifying. This is probably that void where your identity has been for some time. You've addicted yourself to the friction of isolation because that friction is the only way that you know that you're alive, right? And to be a Binteger is to have the integrity to find your value in harmony rather than in conflict. So you're this whole individual who's transitioning from war to peace. And so your integrity here is found in the quiet construction of a map that's shared. And you aren't nothing without that struggle. You're actually everything that you were always meant to be. Integrity is the ability to be that individual who is secure in the stillness. And you aren't losing your fight. You're just finding where your banquet is to feast at. Some of you might be asking, listen, how do I end the I in my marriage, for example, without feeling like I'm losing my masculine frame? See, I'm supposed to be the leader, I feel. If I start leaning on her or admitting that I need the we won't have any intimacy connection. And it'll drive her away because I will look weak. This is where that leadership component of integrity comes in. A weak man leans because he is empty. But a Binteger connects because he is whole. And there's a massive difference here. When you move from the I to the we, from a place of integrity, you aren't really collapsing into your partner. You're actually inviting her into the sovereignty of what that union could be. You're showing her that your map is large enough for both of you. And this is maybe like the ultimate frame. It's the integrity of the individual who is so secure in his internal alignment that he doesn't need to dominate the space to lead that space. And so you're now moving from a dictatorship, if you will, of one to a resonance of two. Now, a common hurdle for the Unmapped Map-Maker is the performance of partnership here, right? You probably start using the word we, but in your head, you're still in that I zone. You consult with people, but you've already made your decision. This is a breach of integrity here. It's a false integration. You're a Binteger that is really pretending to be a fraction. Integrity here is really the state of being the undivided individual, and it demands that you actually enter the we zone, right? It demands that you allow other people's maps to overlap with yours, even when it's inconvenient. This is where the relief actually lives. The relief isn't in the word, It's in the surrender of the guard. It's in the way that you stop checking the perimeter of your ego and realizing that people inside, like letting people inside your walls, is where you actually are able to hold your ground far more confidently. You might be also wondering, is it possible to end the I in my professional life? See, in business, it's all about the individual performance, right? And if I start talking about the we, won't I really lose my competitive advantage professionally? This is that old map of the 20th century. See, in the world we're building, isolation is a liability. The most integral leaders are the ones who can build systems of integrity. And when you end the I at work, you become a multiplier. And you move from being the star player to being the coach. Integrity is that state of being an undivided individual, right? It's the secret, scalable power. And so you become this individual whose values are so clear that they create gravitational pull for others. And you aren't competing anymore against others. You are actually creating a we that is unbeatable. And this is like the highest level of masculine utility. Think back, if you will, to the loneliness of that man who didn't show up in your life. Whether he was a workaholic, or maybe he was never at home because he was more of a ghost who entirely left you. What was it like? He was probably a fraction of himself who thought he was whole, right? And so by choosing the relief of ending your I today, you're in essence breaking that curse. You're refusing to be this solitary individual in a cold universe. You're showing your children and your partner and your world around you that a man's greatness is really measured by the quality of his connections. You're becoming this whole individual who is integrated into the fabric of life. And integrity is that quality of being that man who's whole enough to be a part of a whole. And so you're moving now from a state of defensive independence to a state of radiant interdependence. The one is like this cave, and the other one is like this thriving metropolis, right? Imagine, if you will, the silence of that internal critic when you finally admit that you aren't alone. Consider the rest your nervous system will feel when you realize that the protection gap can be closed by becoming a part of community that you are helping to build. Right? This is the piece of an undivided individual. When you're able to align your internal needs for belonging with your external capacity for connection, it's here that the prison of that I finally dissolves. And you aren't alone on the map anymore. You are the map that brings everyone home, right? Now, this is the thrust of this podcast, is to help you dismantle the I am enough alone kind of a lie that has kept you starving for connection. It's meant to show you that your independence has been a defense mechanism, and that your interdependence is about to become your masterpiece. You're ready to be this whole individual who's ready to become a we instead of the I. You're ready really to stop that isolation performance and to start that whole experience in life, right? Because finally you're letting the I rest so that the true whole individual can rise. But as the I ends and the we begins, there's maybe this ultimate architectural challenge still to face. We've spent the past 30 days almost now repairing the past, integrating the gaps and building our integrity, but now we have to make a choice. We've been repairing the map, but now I think we have to choose a path on this map. We've spent our lives maybe reacting to this map, but now we have to respond to our own. And so In tomorrow's episode, I'm going to look at what choosing your own path instead of your absent father's looks like, and how it's maybe time to find out what happens when you finally stop being like his son and start being your own man. So join me for that episode as we land the plane on this series this month. Thank you for listening along. I appreciate it. And let me know down in the comments how this resonated with you. I'll see you in tomorrow's episode. In the meantime,